Today, we're diving into a really bold, almost unbelievable thesis from macro investor Raoul Pal. He argues that we are right on the edge of the single fastest wealth creation event in all of human history. And it's all happening in crypto. This right here is the core claim. For Paul, this isn't just another hot stock tip. He sees this as a genuine chance to catch up financially. A way to level a playing field that he thinks has become almost impossible for the average person to get ahead on. That's a massive statement, right?
So, you gotta be asking, what's the logic here? How can he make a claim that big? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Let's break down his argument piece by piece.
To really get this, we have to start with the problem he's trying to solve. Pal's entire thesis is built on what he calls the world's greatest macro trade, and it all kicks off with one simple global reality. Here's the foundation of it all. According to Pal, governments all over the world are drowning in debt. We're talking about debt so huge they can't realistically manage them. Now, this isn't some political opinion. For him, it's the core economic problem that gets the whole ball rolling. So what happens when you have a debt problem that big? Well, Pal argues the playbook only has one page. Doesn't matter if the economy slows down or a market crashes, the solution from central banks is always the same. They print more money. They inject more liquidity into the system. And this is where it all connects back to crypto. Because for crypto, all that new money, that liquidity, is everything. His research shows that the number one thing driving crypto prices isn't hype or some news headline. It's the flow of money in the global system. He says liquidity leads and price just follows. That's the whole trade in a nutshell.
Okay, so if more money printing is basically a sure thing, what does that do to the market cycle? Well, this brings us to what might be Pal's most famous idea, a concept he calls the banana zone.
The banana zone. That's his name for the final explosive phase of a crypto cycle. It's that part of the cycle where prices just seem to go vertical. Retail investors are piling in, and like he says, things just get really silly. It's the period where he claims the life-changing gains are actually made. And he says this whole thing follows a pretty predictable pattern. First, you get this initial ramp-up where prices start climbing. Then, boom, a correction hits. This is the period of doubt where everyone's thinking, the party's over. But he argues that as more of that inevitable liquidity pours back in, the real banana zone ignites. That's when you get alt season, and suddenly your uncle is telling you about his favorite new coin at Thanksgiving. All right, so we've got the big picture macro idea, and we've got the market cycle. But here's the thing. Pal argues there's something huge that makes this cycle completely different from all the ones that came before. And it's all about who is finally showing up to the party. This time, it's not just us. The players walking onto the field now, they manage trillions of dollars. We're talking sovereign wealth funds, entire nations, the world's biggest asset managers. You've got university endowments and huge corporations building up their reserves. This isn't just a small change. It's a seismic shift in legitimacy and, more importantly, in capital. Okay, so to get a sense of just how big this could get, let's look at where we are right now. According to Pal's sources, there are about 500 million crypto users around the globe. That's already a huge number, right? It's about the same size as the entire internet back in the early 2000s. But he says this is just the warm-up act. See, the goal isn't just to hang out at 500 million. The big players in this space, they're building the pipes and the plumbing to bring in 1, maybe even 2 billion users in the next few years. If that happens, we're not talking about a little bump. We're talking about a 4x increase in the total user base from today. But what's really interesting is that for Pal, this isn't just a story about money. He argues it's also about culture. And that brings us to maybe the most misunderstood part of this whole world. NFTs.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people hear NFT and they immediately think about the crash. I lost a ton of money. This was all a terrible idea. But Pal's got a totally different take. He sees the top-tier blue-chip NFTs not as speculative JPEGs, but as the defining cultural art of our generation. The same way a Warhol painting was for the baby boomers.
And the logic, when you think about it, is pretty straightforward. If all this new wealth gets created, literally trillions of dollars, where's it going to go? Pal points out that historically, the thing that sits upstream of all other investments is art. The super wealthy have always used fine art as a primary store of value, and he believes the most important NFTs will play that exact same role for the new crypto rich. So, with an opportunity this big on the table, Pal has a really important warning. Don't mess this up. To get through the cycle, he lays out a few very clear rules. And his rules for how to play it are actually pretty simple. First, pick quality projects. He says stick to the top ones that have real people using them. Second, stay away from leverage. He calls it the fastest way to get kicked out of the game. And third, security is everything. His number one rule is just don't lose your tokens. And that brings us to what might be the most surprising piece of advice he gives. He says, if you look at the people who really got rich in crypto, their strategy wasn't all that complicated. They weren't day trading like crazy. They just bought a quality asset and did nothing. They let the cycle do all the hard work for them. And all of this, it all builds to his really, really big long-term prediction. Pal thinks the total crypto market cap could swell from around 2 or 3 trillion today to $100 trillion in the next decade. I mean, that's just a staggering number. But it shows you he's not just seeing a short-term trade. He's seeing a long-term revolution in technology and finance. So when you put it all together, what Raoul Pal is describing isn't just another market trend. It's a world where crypto could actually re-level the playing field for millions of people. And that leaves us with the one big question we have to ask ourselves. Is this all just insane market hype, or are we actually watching a true once-in-a-generation shift happen right before our eyes?